this responsibility. The voter referendum failed, as you know. As you also know, that in March we had some retaining wall failures over on Thames Street. I don't know if you have had the opportunity to go down Thames Street and see that, but there's a large failure right next to Paul's Pasta in between School and Pleasant Street, and then as you go farther down there's one at Electric Boat. As a result, not only of that, but the necessity to address this street and its condition, the committee was formed. Here's a picture of that failure, and you'll see here that this helps us to understand the complexity of this project. This is not a simple repaving project. This is a project that has to include the retaining walls, it has to include drainage. There are several features of this project that make it unique and complex. The purpose of the committee was to identify why the 2009 referendum failed, to identify potential cost-saving measures, to revisit the work scope, and to consider design alternatives, but to also maintain, one of the goals of the project was to keep the rehabilitation such that Thames Street would be a safe, structurally sound, and functional roadway. It was not just a matter of creating a smooth surface. It was really to have a safe structure and to provide recommendations for the town council. In addressing this purpose, the committee took a slightly different approach. We started with a walking tour so that everyone who was on the committee would be familiar with the current condition of the street. We walked the street, we looked at at the features, we looked at some of the challenges that were in the project. We also authorized a subsurface testing program. We had not done this earlier. And Malone and McBroom, along with both the city and town highway departments, created test pits to look at the condition of the road underneath the surface so that we could see exactly what we were dealing with and so that we would understand what would have to be done in order to rehabilitate the road. We also conducted a public survey. We wanted input from the public on why this project failed and what people thought would be important in a future project or as we went forward. We put the survey on the town and city websites. We advertised it. It was noted in the paper. We had them at the public libraries. It was advertised in both the municipal and town halls. We had 163 comments, which you will see in the committee report. You'll see the results of that, and I will allude to that as we go on. 163 may not seem like many people when we talk about the overall citizenry. However, it's more people than we would have gotten in a public hearing. And that's what we wanted to get, was as many people as we possibly could. We revisited the work scope of the entire project, looking at what the project was to entail, and we looked at alternative strategies so that we could fulfill the project in numerous ways, and particularly looking at money. One of the things we learned from the survey was that it was all about the money. And so we did what we could to bring this in the most cost-effective way we possibly could. When we looked at the survey, again, it was money. One of the biggest thing that we found out in the survey, and I don't think it was new to any of us, was that the project cost was excessive, and the economic times were poor. And we wish that the condition of the road would be sensitive to that. However, it's not. There was, as I noted earlier, voter confusion as to why the town should be responsible for funding this project. There was a lack of information regarding the need for the project and a lack of information regarding what the project entailed. That leads us to our next one. There were several responses that indicated that people thought this was more of a streetscape enhancement rather than a roadway rehabilitation, that people had heard more about elements of the design that would have provided some beautification, and they thought that that was the aim of the project, which it was not. But we kept these ideas in mind as we went forward. In the test pit program, we have a picture of there were 10 test pits being done that were 10 test pits that were performed, and we learned quite a bit about the underlying structure of the road, which we want to talk about as we go through the next slides, but we also want to recall that this was a joint project, that both the city and the town highway departments were involved, and it allowed us to look at alternative ways to reconstruct the road so that we could save money and treat the road not as a whole, but with what, according to what was underlying the street. What we found is that the street requires different treatments in different areas. And if we go to the next slide, what we'll do is we'll begin with the area that is the southernmost area. This would be the area that goes from where Thames Street meets Eastern Point, moving up to a point close to Fort Street. What we discovered is that underlying this structure, we have on the eastern side a concrete base, and on the western side we have a gravel base, two different treatments underneath the road. Mostly because of things that have had to be done under the road. There are utility cuts in here. Jump in anytime. You're doing fine. This is the part where, you know, I am not the construction engineer, but I certainly have talked about this enough. And so what we're recommending for this area is that we remove all the concrete in the road, reclaim the bituminous concrete and pavement, and maintain a gravel base and or supplement. And then what we would, and the reason we want to do this is that we looked at the fact that we do have a concrete base and we do have a gravel base, and if we had both of them in either way, we'd be okay. However, if we were to treat the road now with two different treatments underneath, what's going to happen very shortly due to weather conditions is that this road is going to split, because the two different bases are going to respond differently to weather elements. And so we're going to have a split in the road, and in no time at all we'd be looking at repairs again. So we're going to have it so that we have a clear gravel base underneath the whole thing. We're also looking at sidewalks up here. What we would do is that we would have a sidewalk on the eastern side of the street that continues up where it, as it does now, all the way up to where Thames Street meets Eastern Point. On the western side of the street, that sidewalk would only go up to the point which is the northern gate of Electric Boat. From that point on, and you'll see this later in a picture, we now have an asphalt curbing, and that we would have the same treatment. We would repair that asphalt curbing, but we would not bring a sidewalk all the way up that side, all the way to where Thames Street meets Eastern Point. Also, at this point of the street, we would have concrete curbing. This would be concrete. We felt that the concrete that was there had held up over time relatively well, so that we could deal with a concrete curbing along this area. From Fort Street to a point about 300 feet north of School Street, this is the area that was addressed by the 1990s improvement. And so what we find here is that we have a good concrete base, and that what we will be able to do is do a simple mill and overlay on this area. The granite curbing that is in place will remain in place. It will not have to be reset. It will not have to be picked up. Nothing will have to be done with that. As for the sidewalks, there are some minor repairs that may have to be done, but basically they are going to stay as they are as well. From the point 300 feet north of School Street to Bridge Street, this is the area where we have the biggest concern. What we found in our test pit program is that the concrete that underlies the street is rotting from the bottom up. And that's because of what underlies this. There's an ash, you can see the ash underneath there. You can see the timber from the trolley as well. This is the area where, did you want to? Okay. This is the area where we need to do a full depth reconstruction of the street. This is where we have to do our biggest work. Did you want to add something here?
And I'll just add that under this section of the roadway, we encountered a lot of clay. And just from a technical standpoint, clay absorbs water and holds that water under the roadway, and that has attributed to the rotting of the concrete from the bottom up. And so the recommendation is here is to remove the concrete and replace it with a gravel base.
Well, what we wanted to do at this area also is to bring from Bridge Street down to Puffins, which is where the granite curbing currently ends, to put in the granite curbing. We wanted to do that for both